Okay, let's do number 11 from the Unit 1-2 review sheet to get ready for that Unit 1-2 test. And there's two methods to do this. So here we're stating the quadrant of the terminal given some signs of the trig functions. So we have two methods. Method 1, we use that memory trick and we think about the, remember when the order of the quadrants, so that starts at the quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4, and we write all students take calculus. That C in the middle just reminds me of how to count. I think of that the correct way to write to count is 1, 2, 3, 4, following that C. But I'm going to make that a little neater without that count. All students take calculus. And that memory trick is showing us what trig ratios are positive in that quadrant. So the A stands for all. That means all the trig functions are positive. And then this one is cosine, and the opposite of the inverse of cosine is secant. So those will both be positive. And then we have T for tangent, or its inverse, cotangent. That's where those are positive. And then we have sine and cosecant, since those are inverses, that's where those are positive. So what we're looking for is cosine is negative. Each of the signs, each of the trig functions is positive in two quadrants. So cosine is positive. Well, everyone's positive up here in quadrant 1, right? Because that's what the all is. And the other time that cosine is positive is way down here. But this is saying cosine is negative. So when does that happen? It's either here or here. Okay, so we've already restricted our graph to it's either quadrant 2 or 3. Now we go to our other clue and we see tangent is also negative. Looking just at those two quadrants, which one of those has a positive tan? I'm sorry, negative tan. This one has a positive tan, so it's not that one, so it's the other one. So this one has a negative tan and a negative cosine. The only thing that's positive there is sine and cosecant, sorry. So that is our winner, so we have quadrant 2. So here, for part A, we have quadrant 2. Okay, in part B, we find the sign of the expression tangent theta secant theta given that the terminal side theta lies in quadrant 2. So we have quadrant 2 again. Tangent in that quadrant is negative because tangent's positive here and here, 1 and 3. So in quadrant 2, it's negative. So that's a negative. And secant in quadrant 2 is also negative. Secant is positive in 1 and 4. So it's negative in quadrant 2. So a negative times a negative gives me a positive. So the sign of tangent theta secant theta in quadrant 2 is positive. All right, that's method 1. So if you're happy with that method, you'd like to stop, I'll just kind of freeze frame here, and you can stop watching this recording. I'm not a big fan of method 1. I'm more of a logic person, so I'm actually going to just move this over and squish that up. That's our method 1. I can't even really see it anymore. Okay, so my method 2, the other method that I use, let's do orange so it's complementary to that blue, is kind of using logic and thinking, okay, well, cosine follows the sine of x, sine follows the sine of y, And tangent follows the sign of y divided by x. So when they're the same sign, it's positive. When they're opposite signs, they're negative. And then thinking about the quadrant of the terminal side of theta, cosine is negative when x is negative. Cosine is negative when x is negative, so that's this way. That's either quadrant 2 or quadrant 3, right? Can't be those because x is negative. And then I'm also given, get a different color here, tangent is negative. Tangent is negative when x and y are opposite signs. Wait. Yeah, that's right. Because if they were same sign, negative times divided by a negative is a positive. Positive divided by positive is a positive. So this tells me that x and y are different signs. So here I have a negative, x is negative and y is negative. And here I have x is negative, y is positive. So if I have x and y are different signs, and my only choices are either quadrant 2 or quadrant 3, it must be quadrant 2. So my answer for part A is quadrant 2. Same idea for the next part, part B. So the sign of the expression tangent in quadrant 2, that means quadrant 2, we got to think x and y are opposite signs. Tangent is y divided by x, so tangent must be a negative. And secant in quadrant 2, secant is the inverse of cosine, so it follows the sign of x. And in quadrant 2, x is negative. So negative times a negative gives me a negative. I'm sorry, positive. So my daughter's laughing at my math. So we have, what do we have? The sine of tangent theta times secant theta in quadrant 2 is positive. Okay, so that's method 2. So for method 1, watch the first half of the recording and you get this blue area. And method 2 is in orange and green over here.